Hi, everyone, and welcome to History Happy Hour about Indiana Youth Group. My name is Callie McCune, and I'm the Public Programs Manager at the Indiana Historical Society. It's really great to see you all here with your beverages, and I can't wait till we can see everybody in person again. In the meantime, Zoom does its trick. This happy hour is brought to you with support from One America Financial Partners, a national provider in the insurance and financial services marketplace. We're really appreciative that One America can help us make these happy hours happen week after week. At the Indiana Historical Society, we aim to be Indiana's storyteller, connecting people to the past. And we do that by collecting millions upon millions of pieces of paper-based materials, whether that's books or paintings, letters, photographs, diaries, maps. I could go on, but I won't. And then finding interesting, exciting, and intriguing ways to share it, whether that's through publications, exhibitions, or events like this. About 5 years ago, IHS took a look at our collections and realized that if we really wanted to be Indiana's storyteller, we needed to reflect an inclusive story of our state. Starting with just 2 collections, we launched the LGBTQ collecting initiative about 5 years ago. That today includes almost 200 oral histories from across the state, along with a plethora of documents telling stories from drag to legalizing marriage here in Indiana, newspapers telling you where to find a safe space, fundraisers about the AIDS crisis, and so much in between. Later tonight, you're going to hear about one of our newest collections that has come into this collecting initiative of IYG, which we got just before COVID shut everything down. It's not available for you guys to research yet or to dig into, but we promise as we get back into our building, as it's safe, we're going to make that accessible to you as quickly as possible. And I think Mary and Jordan will tell you a little bit more about that as we get going. But for us, collecting the documents, photographs, newspapers, legal pieces, books, and more that tell the story of Indiana and Hoosiers' LGBTQ voices, make sure that current and future historians can include them in their work. And hopefully we create a more well-rounded part of Indiana's history that tells the story of our entire state. So before we dive into that a little further, and I toss this over to Mary, our moderator, I want to give you a little bit of Zoom logistics. Jordan, there we go. I made a handy dandy slide for y'all today. You all will be muted for this event. You know you'll mute it because there's a little red microphone in the corner of your screen. I have a picture of it handed dandily in the corner. You can toggle between how your screen looks like by clicking in the top corner. You can see us all Brady Bunch style if you want, or as we would suggest, watch us from presenter mode. So you're just seeing the person that's speaking on the screen. You can toggle that and see more using the bar in the top of your corner and selecting view options. For this event, Mary, Rann, and Jordan will talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up for your questions. If you have them, put them into the chat box, which should be at the bottom right of your screen. We'll also be peppering in some links as we go, and all of those links will be available in our thank you email, which will come to you right about 10:30 tomorrow, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. If for some reason the links are not copying and pasting for you into your favorite browser from the chat, don't worry, they'll all be there tomorrow morning. If you enjoyed this program, consider coming back for more. Every Thursday, we're back doing History Happy Hours. Next week, we've got Kyle Long and Herb Miller talking about Indianapolis soul music, and for our city, the legendary Lamp Records. And then keep an eye out on indianahistory.org for future information about History Happy Hours, including talks about the Miami people, Ohio River Pirates, CIA agents, and a ton more. Again, that's at indianahistory.org. So without further ado, let me toss it over to Mary Gervitz, an archivist at the Indiana Historical Society, to get us started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you, Jordan and Rann, for agreeing to chat this evening. So I'm just going to quickly introduce Rann and Jordan. Rann has been working in human resources for over 20 years and is the first ever human resource person at Indiana Youth Group. He was also a youth at IYG during the early years of the group and is grateful for the impact that it made on his life and the friends that he still has from that time. He's been with his partner Mike for 21 years, and they were legally married in 2013 in Jamestown, New York, since it was not yet legal at that time in Indiana. Rann also likes to bowl, take pictures, document local history, and collect various kinds of toys and collectibles. Lastly, he is a longtime Epilogue Players theater member and has acted in various plays and a few musicals over the years at playhouses around Indianapolis. He is also the historian for Epilogue, which has served Indy for 44 years. Jordan is the architectural archivist and coordinator of the Indianapolis Bicentennial Project for the Indiana Historical Society Archives and Library. They have a master's degree in public history from IUPUI and a bachelor's degree in art history from Heron School of Art and Design. They previously worked at Indiana Landmarks and DNR's Division of Historic Preservation and Archaeology, and serve on the boards of Historic Urban Neighborhoods of Indianapolis and Preserve Greater Indy. So I thought just for like an icebreaker to get us started, since we are not going to be able to gather for the Pride Parade and Festival this year, I wonder if either of you wanted to share a favorite memory from past festivals or parades?
Sure, I will. I think I'm going to go back a little bit in history since we're on the topic of history today and talk about the first two celebrations that were the Pride Days were called Celebrations on the Circle. Yeah. And that's where they took place, on the circle in public, where anybody could walk up. There was no admission charge or anything like that. It was also definitely the ability for people to protest, and they did. But the second year in particular, I thought was very memorable because we had a great booth with a dunk tank and drag queens and also some of our people, I mean, and also baked goods, because we were always selling something to raise money. And so we were raising money for one of our trips to the health conferences that we went to, some of us. So it was just a very memorable day for so many reasons. But being on the circle for Pride Day, I have to say, for both of those years we were there, were just memorable just being there. But all and you're going to see a picture, I believe, in one of the pictures we're going to show today from that very Pride Day with that booth. So we won second place for best booth, by the way. So.
I love it. That's great. Jordan, you have anything?
Yeah, I'll bring us back to more recent history to 2019. I got to walk with Lopone, the Grand Marshal of the parade, and Lopone is this really awesome, very inclusive performance drag collective that I've been a big fan of for a while. So it was just really great to walk in the parade, and every time you turn the corner you could hear the crowd sort of roaring and clapping, and I had never experienced anything like that before.
It's awesome. I love it. So let's get started and talk a little bit about IYG. So Rann, can you kind of tell us how Indiana Youth Group came about and sort of where it got its start?
Yes, absolutely. Indiana Youth Group started because Chris Gonzalez, that you see pictured here in the middle, and some others, including Pat Jordan, who were members of the Gay and Lesbian Switchboard, got a lot of calls from youth and didn't have somewhere to refer them, specifically for people under 21 and 18, those kind of ages. So it just, it was a continual thing. And Chris, having been a gay youth in the closet for some years, he was from Griffith, Indiana, by the way, and from a very Catholic family, but ended up being a very supportive family when he did come out to them. He realized that there needed to be a place or something for youth, because there were obviously a lot more places that people over 21 could go. So with Pat Jordan and his partner, Jeff Werner, they decided to start this organization back in late '87. And they started it in their own living room. I mean, Chris and Jeff. So yeah, in the beginning, people were meeting in the living room of their house, and they were having a lot of educational meetings. it was also obviously for social reasons. One of the biggest reasons people got involved back in those days, including myself when I later joined, was to meet up with others like yourself, because it was so hard back then to know anybody who was gay or lesbian or, you know, anything else for that matter that was different. And it was such a time where it was frowned upon, and people talked very poorly about us. You know, and even the protesters, some of the signs were awful at some of those events. But yeah, that's why he wanted to start it. I mean, he had been through it himself, and luckily he had a supportive family, but not everybody did or does. And he knew that there was a huge need, so that was why.
And I think Rann, you can speak to this, and Jordan as well. Can you tell us a little bit more, set some more context about what the atmosphere was like around LGBTQ culture in Indiana at the time when IYG was just starting out?
Do you want me to start? Okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
First of all, I just want to say thanks to everyone who's joined us. And I just want to say that, you know, this is a broad stroke of LGBTQ community history, and like there's not a monolithic experience or perspective. So this is just sort of where I'm coming from and from my research. But the 1980s culture was a little bit different, but you might see some comparisons to today. There were a lot of like paper-based publications that were distributed on a monthly basis that described, you know, the nightlife. We're talking bars, cruising sites, bathhouses, local and national political issues. But that's very much for like a 21 and up audience. But that's definitely something that the youth could have known about, but very much on everyone's radar was, you know, there's a lot of police discrimination and harassment. So that's where a lot of my research has been. Back in 1985, there were demonstrations for 7 Fridays in a row on the Circle to sort of protest police discrimination. The ICLU created a gay lesbian rights task force to sort of advocate for themselves to the police department. We know that police were doing surveillance on cruising sites. They were routinely copying down driver's license numbers and license plate numbers as a form of intimidation. And, you know, there were even newspaper articles about possibly prejudiced police work in harassment cases and even homicide investigations. There were numerous men, typically on the younger side, that disappeared, that were murdered. And we find out in the 1990s about a Indianapolis serial killer, Herbert Richard Baumeister, who could have been involved with a lot of those cases. So you have all of that going on in the 80s, and not a lot of safe places to talk and go to adults to sort of talk about all of these things in the news and things you're seeing. And that definitely plays a role in how the youth sort of come to both the switchboard and the beginnings of IYG as looking for a safe place to sort of talk about these issues and feel safe and secure.
That's true. And I would add also the specter of AIDS and HIV was huge back then. Excuse me. And it was something that IYG spent a lot of time on with the youth, is education about safe sex or staying safe in general. And I have seen and experienced some of the same things that Jordan was just talking about. You know, that there was a lot of discrimination, you know, more than I'd say tends to be the case now. Now, of course, as she also said, it depends who you are and what your experience is. But back then, people in Congress, for instance, would just get up and say horrible things about gay people in general. And it was okay. It wasn't really, I mean, maybe a few people had an issue with it, but not that many. So it was such a different climate. And there was harassment by police. Absolutely. There's sometimes entrapment of people. And IYG was there to really help and to connect the youth with resources, as they are today, by the way. And also that part about them having a place to go that they didn't have before, or meeting people. Sometimes people would come into IYG and that was the first time they met other gay people back then. I mean, now it's a lot easier to meet others like yourself, or at least join a group virtually. But back then it was very difficult. So a lot of us didn't know many or sometimes any other gay people at the time until we went to IYG.
Yeah, and can you tell us a little bit more about what those sort of first group meetings looked like, Rann, and then how IYG sort of transformed as the word spread?
Yes. Now, I wasn't at the very early ones. I came later.
Yeah.
In like, I think it was 89, early 89, I believe. But from people that I know that were at the meetings that took place in Chris and Jeff's house, they were very intimate, as you would expect. They always were very welcoming, and even later we had Sunday socials, is what they called them, at their house. Also at some other facilitators occasionally, Trish and Renee, who are still with us in this city. So, and then we moved to the Damien Center, and that I believe was in 89. And that's when we started meeting there. And the meetings, one of the reasons we moved there was because it was getting bigger and bigger, and it basically outgrew Chris and Jeff's living room. So we moved to the Damien Center. This is where the Damien Center used to be, not the current one. And that's where we met for some years. And those were very busy times with the meetings twice a month on Thursdays, skating parties once a month, and Sunday socials twice a month. Now, the skating party, by the way, was the first time I went to an IYG event, and it was advertised. IYG would advertise it in newspapers. Now, they didn't say gay skating party, but there was different ways, because even the switchboard did not use the term, I found out, gay and lesbian until much later. In the beginning, it was like community referral service. But again, they would find ways to get it to the right people through the advertising that was effective. So that's how I found out about IYG. Was I saw an ad for the skating party one time period, and I went, and Chris Gonzalez and Jeff were two of the first people I saw. They're welcoming people at the door, and that's how I got involved. I mean, it was like, for me, it was heaven at the time, because it was like going from knowing maybe one or two gay people to now being part of a group, and it became part of a family. Because as you said, I still have friends today that I knew from then. And we have the IYG alumni Facebook group that I started. And so that helps us stay connected as well.
That's great. And so I understand that when Indiana Youth Group first started, it was just the Indianapolis Youth Group.
Right.
But then it expanded statewide to become the Indiana Youth Group. So how did they begin expanding statewide?
Well, back in the early 90s, I remember this because I did go to some of those. There were people reaching out from other areas, especially once the hotline started, which I believe was in 1990, the youth hotline started. And the people from the switchboard, which of course Chris and Pat came from, helped train the youth to be hotline operators, to help people who were in all kinds of parts of the country. They weren't just local people calling. So yeah, they got a lot of calls from all over, and it was something that helped spread. And so some of the calls were from other areas of our state, of course, and they realized there were needs. And Chris, if anything, was an ambitious person and always wanted to do something to help youth. He also worked with Hispanic youth, not necessarily gay. So he was always out there. He was a real go-getter. And Chris realized there was a need. And so he made connections and started doing it. I remember we went to Muncie and we went to Bloomington, some of us, to help start those chapters. Eventually there were, I'm not even sure exactly how many, but at least 8 chapters around the state. And those were in the early 90s. And I don't personally know how long they went on for. But yeah, there was, there's just a lot of need. And IYG was one of the first ones to help fill that need.
So sort of, we touched on this a little bit in some of the things that you were telling us about and memories that you have, but what kind of services to youth does IYG provide then and now?
Okay. Yeah, then, like I said, it was a lot of the social aspect and meeting others and doing all these activities and health conferences for people who could go, because they were usually in other cities. But also the education part was huge, especially with the AIDS crisis. But, just something as sort of simple as dealing with parents that don't accept you. Honestly, back then, to go along with what we were saying earlier, we would occasionally have parents' nights where all parents were invited to come and join us and learn about the group if they didn't know, or ask questions, or, talk to others. Kind of like PFLAG, but I don't know if PFLAG was yet around in our area then. But it was just the IYG version. And, we usually had, out of 30 to 40 youth, we would have 3 to 4 parents that would come. So it was very limited. And most of us, such as myself, who did have a very loving mother, but who was not accepting, just looked at those parents and thought, boy, I just can't believe it that there's a parent who's accepting. And of course, that's a lot different today. I think it's sort of the reversed. It's more so, or at least I like to think, that more parents accept their children than those who do not. And it just wasn't like that back then. So IYG was there to help in so many ways. And I think one of the main goals was to build your self-esteem and self-confidence and help you become the better self than you were when you first came in. And also someone who could advocate for yourself and become a leader potentially in our community. So those are some of the things from back then I think that were most important. And then today, I do think it's a lot different. When I joined IYG again last year as you said, the first ever HR person there, first of all, it was like a dream come true to be back at IYG, and kind of a full circle thing. But also to see what IYG had become. Of course, I knew IYG was still around and thriving over these last 30 years. Now we're in year 33. But I didn't know a lot about it. So some of the differences are they really focus a lot on programming, basic needs, which are just what you would think: food, laundry, sometimes people need a shower. Now, not that often, but if they need it, we can provide it. We have the center we're in since 2017, and it's got all of that. It's got a lot of space as well. The other thing we do is case management. Case management is a really important part. And, looking back in our historical documents, I saw that they got the first ever full-time case manager back in the mid-90s. So case management has been around a while, but it's certainly been revitalized in the recent couple of years. And we have a full-time staff of 12 people now. This started as a group with volunteers, and I don't know when they first had paid staff, but those are the main things we focus on now. So it's less about meeting someone such as yourself and more about the safer space that we provide and the ability to learn and grow, but still advocate for yourself and potentially your community.
Very cool. I was interested in the pen pal program that IYG provides, because I personally have been on a mission sending lots of mail to people while we've been in quarantine. And so can you tell us a little bit more about the pen pal program, which I think has been in existence for quite a while and is still in existence today?
Well, I don't honestly know that. I'm not sure. That's not something I can really speak a lot to, because it was after I had left IYG.
Sure.
I think it started in like 95 is what I believe. I'd have to check my notes. Yeah. So yeah, I honestly can't say a lot about that. I don't have a lot of information about that.
Sure.
I don't know if maybe somebody else does, but.
Yeah. So Jordan, would you like to tell us, make our announcement about this collection that we're receiving?
Certainly. So I'm really, really excited that Rann reached out to the Historical Society to start this conversation about bringing the IYG archive to IHS as part of our LGBTQ collecting initiative, which I think Callie said started in 2014 and includes both visual and manuscript materials as well as oral histories. We have a lot of materials from individuals and organizations, and beyond sort of the archival side of it, we've had an exhibit in-house and we have a traveling exhibit. And I'm really excited about IYG because it definitely fills a sort of a service gap. So often our collections in the archives are sort of captured by older individuals who are either deceased or are sort of retiring out of an institution or business. And like, how can we tell a better story for youth without youth materials or youth sort of captured in these moments and these historic events? So besides, you know, sort of a social service, a youth service organization, I think it's really interesting to see the types of materials this collection has compared to some of the things we've already collected. There's a lot of photo documentation, which is what we have up on these slides. But for now, right now, we have the manuscript materials that we're going to be working with when we are back in the office. And I am particularly excited about the license plate sort of issue of 2010 to 2012. So much of our academic sort of scholarship frames LGBTQ history looking at sort of national politics. Think about 1990s RIFRA and DOMA and these very, you know, anti-gay policy. But in 2010, we have a situation in Indiana where the Indiana BMV denies IYG's application to have a specialty license plate. And they say that it's because IYG had failed to provide evidence that the services have a statewide impact, and IYG sued over First Amendment with the help of ACLU, and they won. And I think this is an incredible case study to look at both the local and the statewide gay history. It's legal history, it's queer history, it's civil rights, it's so many things that I think can serve as sort of this groundbreaking contemporary moment. I think a lot of times we don't think about how things we've experienced are historic. It's sort of hard to separate yourself or to think like, didn't that just happen a week ago? But it happened in 2012, which was so long ago. So we were living through historic moments that I think will serve future scholars and researchers as they sort of untangle this complicated history.
Yeah, and if I could just add something to that, the picture, for instance, that is on the screen now is when we went to Washington, D.C. for a health conference at that time, and I think that was in '89. But that was we drove in a van from Indianapolis to Washington D.C., the group that you see in this picture. Now, who you don't see is Chris and Jeff. They were there, but they actually flew. So, we drove, and it was actually a really fun experience. But yeah, we made sure to get in front of the White House and get our picture, and did a lot of conference events, and a lot of times IYG was at these conferences not just as a participant, but usually also as a presenter. And sometimes the youth would be some of the ones presenting, and you saw that in the first picture when Chris was there with Jeff and a couple of the youth here. You have Paul and Vanessa here with them, and Jeff on the end. And then this picture, I have to say this about this picture here. I was not in this picture, but it's one of my favorite pictures from IYG history, because that's the U.S. Capitol they're standing in front of. And it just shows, this was a different time. It was actually easier back then to take a group of youth in a van, or I think here they used a bus. I wasn't in on that one. But they went in this picture, as it says, they went to the 1993 March on Washington. That was a huge event, and it was for gay and lesbian rights. And those youth got to experience that through IYG. And of course, that wasn't everybody. And even in the picture, not everybody made it into the picture, because I have gotten a bunch of other pictures from that event from IYG's perspective. And I realized there was a lot more people there than in this particular picture, but it's still a great picture, and it shows some of what we got to do back then. And you're right, Jordan, you don't know when you are living history, but you are. And especially in this case, because, you know, gay and lesbian rights were such a new thing at that time. And we were honestly on the front lines fighting it, the whole group, I mean. And so was the other people in this community.
Well, and do you think those experiences with IYG, being able to take youth to our nation's capital and to be involved in political protests and demonstrations, do you think, sow the seeds for future activism? Either of you want to?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we have some real leaders from our alumni group. For instance, Zach Adamson, who's the city council vice president of this city right here, Indianapolis, and you know, others who have led in other ways. So yeah, absolutely, because that's something even today that IYG really stresses is building your self-confidence and being an advocate for yourself and others. So yeah, I would absolutely say yes to that. By the way, this picture is from one of our proms. This was a prom at a bar that was called NYC Connections on Mass Ave. That's no longer there. I believe this was in 1992. It was the third IYG prom. And I was at all three of the first proms. I never went to a prom in high school. So it was just a real blessing to have IYG help give so many people a chance to go to prom. And we still have prom now. Unfortunately, this year it's not happening so far, but we've had it for many, many years. So it's a real treat. And I can't say enough good things about all the opportunities we got in IYG or from IYG.
Yeah, and you sort of mentioned that you weren't able to do the prom this year due to COVID and all that kind of stuff. So how also has some of the programming with IYG changed or shifted, or you had to change an approach due to COVID restrictions? And
well,
how's that affecting youth?
Absolutely, that's a good question. Just like everybody else, of course, this was unplanned. And it was something that came in March that we had to meet with with our staff, our whole staff, and start planning and start a virtual IYG program, which the staff worked very hard to do. Our programming department is 8 of our 12 people, led by Kim Akoff, and they've done such a fabulous job moving our programming to virtual and adding to it, actually. And you know, as with anything that's new, it doesn't start at 100%, but you have to build it. It starts in infancy and goes in steps. And so since late March, I would say, we have been working on that, and we've seen steady increases. And actually, when we go back to the center, which right now is hopefully going to some of that will take place in July. We won't be open full time, but we're hoping at least part-time for programming. Well, then we're going to keep the virtual IYG virtual program as well, as there's no reason to stop doing that. So, you know, what we found is it's been a way to expand our programming in a new direction. So like before, when we had the different chapters, well, now we have virtual programming. So somebody could come in from South Dakota and join us. Now you always have to sign up because we do want to be safe about who's in our programs, whether it's in person or virtually. But that is something that, again, the staff has worked hard to get to that place. And so it's something that's building every week. And we are really happy with that program or programming.
That's great. And you mentioned sort of you can get a little more of a national reach this way. And I wonder, I don't know if you can speak to this or not, but it just sort of, I was thinking about it. IYG was such a, you know, pioneer in outreach to LGBTQ youth. Do you know of any sort of similar programs that around the country that it may have inspired, or who modeled themselves off of our program here in Indiana? I don't know, Jordan, you might know, or Rann.
Yeah, all I can say about that is I do know from some of my reading that, for instance, there was a group we helped start in Ohio, and that IYG is, from our knowledge, is the oldest gay and lesbian youth group of its kind. Right. But that's really the only thing I can say for sure about that. I'm not sure if Jordan can add to that.
The only other thing I can think of are the sort of college and university-based groups. You know, you see a lot of gay, straight student alliances that evolves into, you know, rebranding of LGBTQ or sort of queer space groups at universities and schools.
So did we get through all of our photos that we have to share?
I'm not sure, but I would tell you guys that this is the one I was referring to earlier from the second ever celebration on the circle.
Oh, yes.
So this is you can't really see our booth in this picture, but these are some of our youth who are pictured, not all of them. And so, yeah, this is also where we had the dunk tank, but you can barely see that in the background there, so a little bit. So it just gives you a little taste of what it was like. And I think, honestly, this is when the protesters had entered the circle. I found, I mean, sometimes you don't remember everything from that long ago, but I found articles that said that the protesters tried to storm the stage and take over the program. So I don't think this is at that point, but the Indianapolis Men's Chorus was actually getting ready to start at the time that took place. And this, I think, is just some of the youth's reaction to the protesters who went around the circle and had their hateful signs, very hateful, and things like that, and were glaring at us. And for some reason, they were almost all men, or they might have all been men. I don't know why. But they were from a local church, or at least some of them, and they were showing, I guess, what they wanted to show and say. So, but yeah, this was some of how some of our youth were just showing them a reaction. And I like the signs that somebody, I don't know who put those signs together, that say "Gay by God's design." So, yeah.
Those are great. Jordan, can you tell us a little bit more? Oh, we didn't talk, did we talk? We talked briefly about the skating parties.
I think I just mentioned that they took place.
Yeah,
we had the skating parties for years, and I don't know how long they went on for, but you know, people really enjoyed those. It was a time to just let loose and, you know, listen to music and skate. Of course, not everybody was great on skates, but we even had, one time we had a drag show at the skating rink. So that was interesting.
That would be interesting.
You know, that went along with the fact that we started talent shows at some point in this time I was there. And, you know, honestly, a lot of it was drag, and that's okay. And it was fun. And we also had some people who sang or did other things, but it was mostly drag. And so people would enjoy that. One thing that I think is also important to bring up in this conversation is transsexual or trans people. Mm-hmm. That really wasn't something that was talked about back then. We found out later that we certainly did have some trans individuals in our group, but they just hadn't started using those terms yet, and they weren't identifying that way yet. So IYG is always welcoming to everyone. Just like I said, at the time, it just wasn't discussed. Right. But later, I mean, it turned out that some of the people, for instance, that did drag identified as trans later. Some didn't, they just did it for fun. So I think that was important. Another way that IYG gave people a stage, literally. And, you know, I noticed after I got back to IYG that there were many drag shows after us over the years. So it wasn't just our group. It was a lot of fun times, as I said, and the skating parties, you know, we would do, those were at the USA East, and one night a month, and it was just fun. And we did things like Thanksgiving celebrations as well, just all kinds of things like that. Really, I mean, people in the alumni group agree that it was such a pivotal time in their life, not just me, and that sometimes it saved lives. It saved people's lives, literally. And also, you know, like I think I gave you guys a copy in the archive, but I have a book that IYG put together of all these letters they received. And of course, they're anonymous, from people around the country who wrote into IYG. Sometimes they were not part of the Pen Pal program, which was a great program. And I see that it's still existing, by the way. Someone said in the comments, I was not aware of that, so I learned something today. But just people writing in because they knew about the hotline. The hotline, I want to stress, was featured on 2020 in a story, was mentioned in Time Magazine, IYG was, and I believe the hotline too, NBC Nightly News, and of course the Advocate. So those are just 4 of the magazines or news channels that spoke about or featured IYG. So again, Chris and the group, some of the group members and board members were out there getting publicity for us and getting, more importantly, the word out so that youth could benefit from this group.
Could you tell us a little bit more about if people are interested in, you know, supporting the work that IYG does today, how they can go about supporting LGBTQ youth in our city and in our state?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm sure you guys will have the IYG website in the links. So that's the best way, is to go to the website. There's our Amazon wish list is on there, and there's a button to just, if you want to make a donation. Obviously, we're always willing to accept volunteers, because sometimes people, maybe they can't donate money, but they maybe can donate time. We certainly take donations of clothing and food. I want to stress food because right now it's not as needed because of the situation we're all in, but typically our pantry that we have for the youth is, as you know, some youth are more blessed than others when it comes to financial things, including food. Some need more help. And so we let people go in with a staff member and pick out their own food and put it in their own bag that they use. So we can always use food donations, monetary donations, donations of time, and sometimes expertise in other areas. Like we have people who recently made masks, homemade masks for the staff for when we get back. Or we have somebody who donates their time and energy to plow our parking lot when it's snowy outside, or things like that. So there's so many ways that people can help. It's a whole different world we're in, obviously, now, as far as his background checks that are needed when you're actually working with the youth. But that's why we have our volunteer coordinator and myself that help with that. So yeah, there's a lot of ways people can contribute, and I would say the website is the best resource for all of that, because it has all those links and a lot of other great information, including some videos that our staff put together with the help of Channel 20 recently, including, I want to point out, one about the history of IYG, as well as several others. And they're only about 5 minutes each. So great videos on that page as well.
Great. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And also just sort of circling back to, community collaboration, which is happening with IYG, but it also happens with our organization, the Indiana Historical Society. So Jordan, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the LGBTQ collecting initiative in general, and what's going on with that?
Yeah, so sort of taking this full circle, the most robust collection we have right now in the collecting initiative actually comes from Chris Gonzalez. It's the Michael Bohr Indy Pride Chris Gonzalez collection. So his materials were kept at the Indy Pride Library under the care of Michael Bohr. And this slide shows some examples of flyers and photographs from this collection, but it has quite a significant number of periodicals, magazines, sort of leaflets that you might think of. It's really sort of the first step at understanding where people were going, what they were doing, sort of the timeline of activism and change and acceptance in the city. This is a great beginning, but I do hope that we can make the initiative more inclusive and more intersectional. There's not a lot of trans and bisexual and asexual voices in this collection, in this initiative. One of my personal research sort of avenues that I've been going down is this look at bi-erasure. We don't see a lot about bisexuality in this type of content. So I want to sort of study large amounts of text corpora and see why or how we can sort of find that invisible the language or the gaps in all of this sort of archive material on bisexuality. But we also need to make this collecting initiative more intersectional, get more voices outside of the white experience, because even though we're talking about a marginalized community, there is not one monolithic experience or perspective. So I'm really hoping to get more diverse stories and perspectives as we move forward with this initiative.
Okay.
And there's certainly a lot of road to cover. There's a lot of different projects going on right now in the city that are really exciting, that are using these collections. We have the Digital Encyclopedia of Indianapolis, which is a bicentennial project, and they're sort of looking at their stories because it stops in the 90s, and the only queer history you get is the Damien Center and AIDS, and that, you know, needed to kind of continue that story. Also, our Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission is working on a very extensive research project on queer history and adding that to all 17 of their historic neighborhood district plans. So that's part of the Preserve Indy initiative, if you want to check that out. And then always there's going to be sort of your national academic scholars, but also there's a lot of local public historians doing really exciting scholarship with these collections. And, you know, we can't be written about, we can't be in a documentary if the scholarship doesn't exist, and the scholarship doesn't exist if the archives don't exist. So, you know, we're just taking this step by step and making sure we get researchers connected with some exciting new materials.
Great. I think that we did have a question, some Q&A, and we had a question. Jordan sort of talked about, you know, having some diverse voices in our LGBTQ collecting initiative, but this was specifically about IYG. Most of the photos that we've seen on the slideshow don't have many people of color in them. Were there many Black or brown members in the early history of IYG?
I don't think there was as many as there are in the more recent years, and that wasn't because anybody was, you know, not welcome. It was just, you know, maybe we weren't doing a good enough job getting out into these other communities and making sure people knew. I think I want to say this, that one of the reasons of the many our IYG moved to this building was to be more centrally located, to be on a bus line, and to help even draw in more diverse populations. And so one thing that's also very different is we are much more diverse now, and that includes sexuality, gender, etc. So I think we always welcomed anyone. In fact, I know we did. And there were certainly people that you didn't see in the pictures because these are just 6 pictures. But yeah, there wasn't as many as I would have liked. And I don't think that was anyone's fault. I just think we were a new group at the time. Those are all in the first few years. And we were trying to get out there and welcome anyone and everyone. But also, you know, it just wasn't as easy to get the word out. You know, and I mean, I stumbled upon it. So I think it got better as the years went on, but yeah, these pictures just represent the first few years. And there were certainly some, but yeah, not as many as there could have been.
Yeah. But you said you think now with the new location and, and outreach and things, it's a completely different situation.
Oh yeah, and we, for instance, we have a staff member who does a lot of things, but one of the things he does is snapshots of who all comes to IYG or participates in the programming on a weekly, monthly, or quarterly basis. And we have all those statistics. So we know that the move has tremendously helped that, being on the bus line, being centrally located, and being on one of the main streets of Indianapolis, and, you know, with our name on the building. I mean, you know, the name was not released publicly until 1998. And so people had I think people had a hard time finding us sometimes. And the youth, by the way, voted that. The youth voted to make the name public and promote IYG more. And so that when you look through the many, many, many pictures we have at IYG and in photo albums, etc., you see a lot of diversity that you don't necessarily see on those particular pictures, but you can always do better and you can always do more. And I think that's something that IYG has evolved to do better. So, yeah.
And do you have any idea in general about, how many youth you are serving at this time?
You mean during this
just in general, like just right today, like how many youth you all are serving?
Well, typically, I mean, it's in a month, it's hundreds.
Yeah.
So in a year, it would be thousands. And
gotcha.
what happens is when a youth comes in, I mean, if it's their first time, they create a little profile for the computer sign in. And then we know, and they only have to just sign in. And it's sort of anonymous. They don't have to use their name. And then we track based on that. And the case managers do an intake and they find out, is that youth in a safe place at home? Do they have someone they can talk to? Because as we said, a lot of people are more blessed these days, but not everybody. So, there's a lot of resources, and one of our jobs is to help connect youth who need it to those resources. So we see on a typical time period, not right now, hundreds of people a month, and it just varies by the month and the day. Friday is as you might imagine, our busiest day. We have, on the weekends, we're not typically open except for when we have a special event like the prom or something like that, a celebration we have once a year, things like that. So yeah, we have a lot of events. And like I said, I think one of the main reasons people come is just to be with their friends and hang out in a safer space. And a lot of times the youth come right after school. So they come from school straight to IYG and get snacks and hang out with their friends and play games or do karaoke. Just we really want it to be a fun experience too, but we also want to get some of that education in there, some of that programming, and certainly case management and basic needs.
Okay. So we're really glad at IHS that we're going to have this collection now from IYG. And so Jordan, can you tell us a little bit more about, we have received most of the collection right now. And so what is that going to look like with processing and how does that sort of work? And what's going to be the final product of that collection for researchers?
Yeah, so Rann has taken the time to really sort and organize and get the collection in really good shape to sort of streamline our processing and archiving of it. Right now, we just have the manuscript materials, so that includes the documents, some letters, some newspaper clippings, flyers, really good binders that organize different content and events. I'm really excited about the license plate scandal binders, if you couldn't tell from today. So we have all the manuscript materials, and then, once it's safe to sort of handle material again and Rann is done sorting through the visuals, we'll get the photographs and maybe some video footage as well. So the collection is, it'll probably be about 10 to 12 sort of archival size boxes total. It's a nice little feisty collection, and hopefully with all of Rann's work, we'll be able to get it sort of through the queue rather swiftly.
Great. Well, and because we'll also probably be able to put some photographs or some items from the collection on our digital image collection. Mm-hmm. And I believe we already have some items from our LGBTQ collecting initiative on our digital image collection, Jordan?
Yeah, if you go to images.indianahistory.org, you can see the Indiana LGBTQ collection. As it stands now, it's mostly materials from the Chris Gonzalez ND Pride collection and the Mark Lee collection. I'm hoping to get the Lopone collection up sometime this month. Just depends on how everything pans out. And then Rann has taken the time to actually digitize his visuals before he gives the hard copies to us. So you can actually check those out on the Facebook page that Callie will send a link to.
Yeah, and just to add to that, this year I also wanted to start a Facebook group for Central Indiana LGBTQ history in general. And so I started that in January, and I encourage people to check that out. And if you're able to add pictures, articles, etc., please do. I wanted to mention that the magazines and periodicals that Jordan mentioned were very helpful. The New Works News, for instance, I went through a lot of those and took pictures and posted some of those, but people have added their own pictures. Of course, I've got pictures from Pride Days of the past, and IYG too. So it's just a lot of good stuff on there. And one of the reasons I wanted to start that is because I could never find something like that on Facebook, or just an easy website to go to for Central Indiana LGBTQ history.
Yeah.
And I really hope that one of the reasons for doing all of this, to me, is to, of course, as you guys do all the time, preserve history, but also for people, as you said too, to be able to see it in the future, because none of us is going to be around forever. And unless we preserve the materials, they're not going to be around forever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to sort of end the conversation. And we do have another event coming up, Jordan, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so in tandem with this, something that's been sort of in the queue for a while is thinking about architectural spaces, buildings, places, places that change over time, and thinking about how the queer community has utilized these spaces and how they've evolved. And so in tandem with the AIA Indiana chapter and the Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission, we're going to host a virtual talk on these architectural spaces. So in this slide, I have examples of some of the survey work that I've done, where I've been sort of going through all these different archival materials and documenting any locational data. So that could be an advertisement, a business listing, maybe an ad or an address listed in a story or newspaper clipping. And if you look at the top right, you'll see a map of about 400 locations in the Marion County, Central Indiana area that I've documented related to queer history. The other three images are examples of structures, just to give you an idea. So we have the Talbot Street Theater, which is the site of the Talbot Street Bar for a long time. In the top left corner, we have the Essex House, which was one place where a lot of early meetings would happen, sort of a precursor to what we think of as Pride Fest today. And then the bottom left corner, I have the Ritz Theater, which was a very quick, brief time period of some early 1970s drag. I know we have documentation of drag sort of on Indiana Avenue in the 30s and 40s, but that some people may argue it's not the same type of drag expression we think of today. So the Ritz Theater was a short-lived drag venue. So talking more about these places and how sort of the space can change the meaning and how different communities use space over time.
Great. Oh, it sounds like it's going to be a great program. Can't wait to check it out.
Yeah, I hope you'll join me.
Of course. Well, thanks so much again. I think I'm going to toss it over to Callie for some final wrap up.
Yeah, thank you all so much for speaking, Mary, Jordan, and Rann. Thanks to Barbara for catching my typo that this event is on July 14th. And you can find that information. I put the link to how to get your spot reserved in the chat too. But thank you all so much for coming. We'll continue with History Happy Hours next Thursday, where we're talking about Indianapolis soul music with Kyle Long and Herb Miller. Same time, same place, new Zoom link. You can register for that, the Building Communities Talk, and many, many, many more offerings that we're doing virtually at indianahistory.org. We want to reiterate that the IYG collection isn't accessible yet, but we hope you keep your eye out for when it is ready for you to be able to dig into it and do some research coming soon, and also coming soon to a digital collection to your computer near you. If during this time of social isolation, you're cleaning out your attics, your bookshelves, your basement, and you have something that you think can help us continue to tell the stories of Indiana, please reach out. In that email you'll get tomorrow, we'll have the email of one of our directors in the library who specifically works on this LGBTQ collection, but we're always willing to talk with you and see if it's something that fits within our scope in collecting. We love it when people find the best stuff hidden in the bottoms of their basements. And that is why we're able to tell some of these stories, is because people like Michael Bohr kept pieces upon pieces upon pieces. You'll get that email from us tomorrow with all the links. It's also going to have an evaluation in it. It'll take you 1 minute. I promise. We'd love to know what you thought and how we can make events like this better in the future and what you want to hear about in the future. And this conversation will be posted to YouTube in the upcoming weeks. Keep an eye out on indianahistory.org to find it. Lastly, if you missed your opportunity to make a donation to the Indiana Historical Society and would like to remedy that, the link is in the chat. We really appreciate all the support that you give us so we can continue to tell Hoosier stories and do events like this. I hope you have a lovely evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we hope to see you again at a next event. Bye, everybody.